Hello, my friends. We back. Hey, what up, Evan? Yo, so your internet is working. I was saying as we got on here that you were having some internet issues.
I think I'm good. I'm just gonna grab my glass of water that I left over here.
Okay, yeah, you gotta be hydrated. Oh yeah, you like the stash, Laurent? My buddy Laurent over there from London, liking the facial. When are you gonna do the stash? Are you keeping the beard the whole time? What are you doing?
I think I'm gonna keep the beard. I've never tried to stash, and since we're not going outside very much, the heat isn't bothering me yet. So I'm gonna keep this.
Yeah, fair enough.
I like it on you though. It suits you. And I think it's nice to have a difference on these live calls. Me having
people can tell the difference between us.
I could put a pink beanie on to match you though if I wanted to.
There's my Alice Glass merch right here. Our merch is so far. How you doing, man?
Oh, I beat you. How are you feeling?
You know, it's I think all of us are. Everyone in the world, maybe especially in the U.S. right now, are dealing with a lot with our friends, with society, with protests, with COVID. There's a lot going on, and I think if we can maintain and we continue to be creative and stay sane, I think we're doing okay.
Yeah, I had a pretty good day back yesterday.
Yeah,
kind of been slow with momentum and motivation. Kind of let a bunch of mixes stack up, and then people were clearly asking for them. So I think I did 4 yesterday, and it was the most I felt like myself in quite a bit, getting 4 mixes done in a day and doing notes on 4 others, like touching 8 songs in a day. Kind of felt back to my normal self.
I feel like pretty much everybody I'm interacting with, whether it's music people, work people, music people, friends, non-music people, everybody's running into a certain amount of just like exhaustion and lack of motivation. And, wherever people can find that is a good thing. But I certainly have run into a lot more people shifting schedules, shifting sessions, adjusting times. Hey, can we push this back? Hey, I'm not feeling it today. That sort of thing. I think it would be good for all of us to understand that and excuse each other for needing to take some extra time to do things. It's
in a sense, in a creative industry, this should be okay and the norm in general, right? To the whole publishing scene, at least in Los Angeles and New York and Nashville, it's kind of this 5-day a week, you're writing songs, work thing. Like how can one expect to write the best song you're ever going to write if you're writing 5 days in a row, 2-3 times a day? Granted, I think people can argue me on this that know better and actually do that. I stopped doing that 2 years ago, but and you probably know best in this conversation. But it always seemed to me that if you got the last session of the day from the best writer, you weren't getting their best foot forward. They're tired, and you can't blame them. And I think you should just cancel things if you're not going to give your full creative efforts to it.
I definitely, whenever I'm working with, especially young artists that have just gotten signed or just gotten a publishing deal, and now they're getting thrown out into a million sessions, and maybe managers and publishers and label people wouldn't like me giving this advice, but I tell all of them, like, yo, if you're not feeling it, don't just chill out for a day. Like, if you don't have anything to write, forcing out bad songs,
yeah, I think they should like that advice, because it's like the idea of 4-day versus 5-day work weeks, right? Studies show that 4-day work weeks are more productive than 5-day work weeks because people are more motivated and you get the extra day's break, jump back on afterwards, right? So a 3-day weekend is going to make someone work harder on the Monday than they would if they're only getting those 2 days and 1 day to recuperate if you're doing a Saturday where you're going out kind of doing things. So I don't know. I think that's good advice. I think it's generally positive in all forms of business, and creatively especially. You should be down with saying, no, I'm not feeling it today, because you're not going to feel it every day. It's not possible.
Well, it's something you and I talk about, and we've talked about on these streams, as well as obviously in person or on FaceTime, I guess, these days. The idea of taking breaks and allowing, whether it's an ear break or it's an emotional break, if you're writing lots of lyrics, taking vacations, obviously that's a part of everybody's life, but the idea of taking breaks for the purpose of being more focused, more efficient, more vulnerable as a writer, more whatever it is. I think it's a really underrated part of being great in anything, but especially as a creative person, is taking breaks in order to get perspective, let your mind rest, all of those kinds of things. I think it's really underrated. And you know this, I know this, probably anybody who's watching this knows this. Everybody gets burnout, and burnout never makes you do good work. It always zaps you for longer than you think it's going to. It's always hard to come back and recover from that. You were talking about a second ago, so many writers, especially if you are a lyric melody writer, there really aren't that many topics that feel really important to write about, and you can run out of them really quickly. I know a lot of people that are top liners that, like you said, sometimes they're doing 2 sessions a day, 5-6 days a week, and it's just, there's only so many heartbreak songs you can write before you're just like, I'm fucking done with this. I mean,
and also, what happens if they write the same song they wrote on Monday on Thursday with you, and then the Monday song gets cut, and then the Thursday song is basically the same song with a different beat, and that can never get used again, right? So you wind up wasting the time.
Well, that's an interesting thing too. I think there's a counter argument.
I'm talking about melody.
Yeah. There's a flip side to that in terms of topics, which is that, there's a few main chord progressions, and mostly people are using a major or minor scale, and there's like a few things that people write about. So in the end, it's like there's something, I don't know, not alchemical, but something hard to explain about what makes a song great, that you may, it's a story I was telling an artist I was working with last week, hearing about, there's Sia did an interview on Howard Stern years ago where she talks about writing, and she plays some demos and plays some like day one iPhone recordings. But she talks about song titles, and I'd heard from a few people that she had written multiple songs called Chandelier around when Chandelier came out, because she knew it was a great title and it had an emotional pull for her, but she wrote a version of it that wasn't any good. The song was never going to do anything. So keep writing that, keep writing the emotion, keep writing it until it's great. So I don't know.
Right. But what happens to the writer? She writes it in the room with that, then claims that he or she wrote the song with her after the fact, because it does have the same lyric. I don't know. This is probably, we can go deep into this. I don't know the relevance.
Let's go into it, because it's actually a discussion. I was talking to my buddy Donut the other week, great producer, and there's been some discussion, this feels like a million years ago, but it was like 4 weeks ago. There's a lot of discussion in the writer-producer community about top liners and royalties and writers who don't produce and producers getting money, and there's all kinds of interesting discussions to be had there about who owns what. I mean, there's a lawsuit with the Lizzo song where she had used a lyric from her song that was in a previous demo, but then it turns out that lyric came from a viral tweet, and how do you assign who gets what? And I don't, I actually don't have really strong opinions on it, because I think, like any smart person, I don't know enough about it and haven't been put in those situations. So I don't want to go like, this is what it should be, because I really don't know. And they're really tough situations. But it's like,
but there are a few rules. There are a few rules, right? There's a few basic rules, and in a pop songwriting session, in that structure, if you're put in between your two publishers or the same publishers, putting someone in the room, you're going in there anticipating that a song is going to have an even split amongst the people that are in the room at first.
Yeah, I mean,
at first, that's the initial.
Yeah,
it doesn't always end up that way.
I want it to be that way. That's the Nashville way.
It doesn't always end up that way, as someone brings in a co-producer or someone else gets hired out to do the drums, and their drums are worth publishing, which I'd argue that a lot of drums are identity and worth publishing. So I think, granted, we should have publishers on this chat to discuss this better than, but your mentor and one of your mentors and manager was a publishing executive. So I'm sure you got some privy information on this too. The rules are subject to change, but I think they do begin that way.
Well, it's the assumption that you get into a room with two other people and whatever if you have nothing at the beginning and you come out with something, that it's a three-way split is a pretty standard thing. I've certainly been in rooms where I've been with two other people and written 80% of a song and we do a three-way split, and I've been in a room with people where I've written 5% of a song and gotten a three-way split. And part of that is just that if you don't do a three-way split, if somebody's on a roll, you don't want to be tearing down their idea and trying to throw a lyric or a chord in just so you can get your money. Sometimes the best thing is to just have somebody, if they're on a wave, you support them and they write a whole thing, or vice versa.
Right. So how does one calculate someone sitting back in the room and facilitating the creative vibe inherent to the want for the best product to come out into the day versus, I have no good ideas and I shouldn't be in this room. I don't fit in here. I don't belong here. Right. So there's really no way to quantify that.
I mean, I think the truth is, if you write a song with someone and you don't like the experience, just don't write another one.
Exactly.
Just don't write another one with them. Just do something else. But yeah, I don't know, man. Yeah,
that's all I got on publishing. I backed out of songwriting 2 years ago, as we've discussed before.
Yeah.
Though I do have a couple of things coming out, and I just made a pretty cool beat with a homie of mine.
You're making beats again?
Well, it was for fun. It was after a dinner party, came up with a song title, and we decided to make the beat for it already. So yeah, here and there maybe, but we're going to leave that off. We're going to leave it there on this live because I don't want people thinking that's happening.
Yeah. Going into publishing conversation. That's an interesting one. I think worthy of a future discussion. Well, we haven't done this for a couple of weeks. I've gotten some really good questions. There seems to be a lot of questions about vocals, and
let's talk vocals.
Yeah, and in kind of every respect, in the respect of home recording setup, gear, of course, which I know you love talking about, how to mix vocals, how to think about vocal production. I mean, we can kind of go any direction with that, and I think it's actually that they all inform each other, and it's all important. Realizing more and more that even if we get out of this pandemic and people are doing in-person sessions, we're going to have a long stretch here. We've had a long stretch, and we'll continue to probably have months of people being, quote unquote, forced to make recordings from home. So home recorded vocals or self-recorded vocals, self-vocal production or remote vocal production is going to just be a big part of things going forward.
I think that's great.
I think so too. I mean,
great.
We maybe talked about this last time, but of the vocals that you get, and you're doing a spectrum of things from huge pop artists to presumably less successful, less moneyed projects, or not successful, but you know what I mean. What is the range of? I don't know. What are the vocals like that you're getting? I assume some of them are going to be amazing, some of them are not. Is it mostly home recorded?
I just mixed this beautiful string arrangement with Phoebe Bridgers on top of it. And I'm a huge fan of Phoebe in general. She's great. But she was recorded so beautifully, right? So the recording of it, I don't know where it was done. I don't know how it was done. I could probably find out. It's so inspiring to work on, right? So right off the bat, you have the arranger, producer, the engineer engaged in the song because the vocal was recorded well. You can't doubt the importance of an amazing recorded vocal. So we should be talking about this. Now, it works against a lot of people because you have to go into it with confidence, right? So you have to go in imagining you're hearing yourself properly. And that's a thing that I always want to talk about is like headphone mix, right? So if we're talking about how to record properly, I think the first thing, besides microphone, preamp, and the vocal chain that everybody talks about, I'm thinking more vibe, room, headphone mix.
I think more and more the gear, microphone, not that it doesn't matter, but
Yeah, it matters to a degree. I think over-processing of the signal being captured is something more to be concerned with than the microphone choice. I think I'm not the biggest fan of an SM7, but I just got an SM7 vocal from someone recently that I had a pleasure mixing. So it was the right fit for that person's voice in that room, and it was easy for me to mix. And I wouldn't even have known it was an SM7 unless I looked at the comments that my assistant Josh had put, or someone left in the session that said it. I wouldn't even have known. I wouldn't have guessed that it was an SM7. So
I'm a huge SM7 fan.
Most people are. Yeah. I despise them.
Why?
It always sounds like this, and the argument of Michael Jackson sounds always used it. Yeah, he sounds like this. The tracks are towering around Michael Jackson. I don't think Michael Jackson's vocal recording is the most ideal sounding. That's not where I would measure up versus a Drake, where for modern recordings, his voice sounds larger than life. Man, I mean, I don't know how it was captured, how it was processed after. I kind of do. I've gotten a dry Drake vocal once before in my life, and it's just so much mid-range presence. It's coming from his voice. I have actually had that dry stem come to me, and he sounds like that. That's him. So get that the best way.
Well, it's worth just interjecting real quick that as much as we talk about the technical aspects, that Michael Jackson fella had some good songs that seemed to be effective. So if in the end you have something like an SM7, you can do everything else perfectly and sell more records than anyone that's ever existed, because in the end, and we'll talk about it, there's these technical aspects to it, but it really is, if you can hear yourself and the room is decently dry and you're not too close to the mic and you have a great song and you emote like crazy, But sorry.
So, I like to think, I was listening to, I think it was an Eric Weinstein podcast recently, the most recent one I think he did with his friend Stefan. And towards the end of it, what?
I love that one. You saw me listening to Ornette Coleman after they were talking.
Yeah, I know. Amazing. That's why I said shapes and you hit me with Vortex.
Vortex. Yeah. Ornette Coleman plays.
He first said he plays in shapes, and after he hears the physics terminology, he goes, "I play in vortexes." That's incredible. I play the vortex.
I want to talk like that. I want to be like that.
I know. But I think that way in a lot of ways. I do think in shapes, and I think in colors when I'm seeing a mix. So when recording, but the thing that really got me towards the end of the conversation, he discusses that there's no way of coming at a conversation in order to learn something from it without asking something that's going to inconvenience someone else, right? So I'd like to come at this by inconveniencing with asking harder questions and asking people, why do they do certain things, right? So if I were sitting with someone that was asking me how to record at home, and I would ask them, well, why do you record with your microphone so close to your mouth, right? I would ask them why. And along the list of things that we could get back would be that, well, I hear myself the best that way. And then you say, okay, cool. So why are your headphones so loud? Or have you tried turning down the track so your vocal stays loud? Have you taken one ear off and put it against your neck so it doesn't bleed into the microphone? Have you tried these things, and why do you do certain things? And I think that the online audio community, or the curriculum of possibilities for learning, doesn't really ask harder questions. They just sell you things that you can use to remedy the problems and create solutions for problems you don't even know you have, that you might not already have figured out on your own. So instead of, I need this, I need that, I need this, I need that, I'm wanting to ask the questions, why do you do something? And then I can maybe prescribe a fix. So knowing that, what do you say to this in the home recording?
Man, I got a lot of thoughts about it. It actually, taking even a step further back, most of the resources that exist on the internet have a financial incentive involved. Yes. And one of the reasons I wanted to do this that you and I've talked about is there's no financial incentive for us to just talk and have people watch and ask questions. I just really enjoy it, and it's a conversation that you and I would have anyway, and to involve other people I think is really great, because I think when you're looking for advice on the internet, there's amazing resources, better than there's ever been, and it will continue to be that way. And I guess things like this are now a part of it. But don't think that a product or the right tactic is going to be the thing that changes the quality of what you're doing or improves it. It really is some of these basic approaches, like, can you hear yourself properly? are you emotionally invested in singing the vocal? These sort of things I think are much more important.
I mean, before thinking that your headphones suck, think, are you distorting them because your headphone amp is too loud, or the vocal is clipping the mix bus internally in the computer that's causing your headphones to sound like they're distorting, versus you having to buy another pair of headphones because so-and-so says these are the best headphones.
You know, one of the things I was thinking about this, I was probably talking about this the other day too, by analogy, my brother works in the coffee industry. He essentially is a middleman between farmers and roasters. He deals with green coffee, so he deals with the commodities market and finding coffee in places like Ethiopia and Honduras and elsewhere, and then helping get those beans, selling them to people who then roast coffee, from Starbucks to a little coffee shop that roasts their own beans. But his education is everything from the farming to pulling an amazing espresso shot. He has a spectrum of knowledge that informs what he does, in that he has an ability to do all of it, essentially. I don't know if he could actually, he probably could grow a coffee plant himself. He can certainly
I'm sure
pull an espresso shot. He can roast beans, but he doesn't do any of those things professionally. That just informs his expertise. And I think this applies to what we do, in the sense that today, if you are making music in any aspect of it, you should be able to do everything. It doesn't mean you should be able to be the best mixer or the best singer or the best piano player or any of those things, but to know how to do them, like, why wouldn't you know how to do it? If you're a mix engineer, you should know how to record yourself singing vocals. You should know what it's like to get a great monitor mix. You should know what it's like to try to take a lead vocal and stack harmonies on top and try some in falsetto and see what that feels like and what it sounds like. Try some in chest voice, try lower, trying all these different things, even if what you're doing in the end is just finding the right volume and EQ for a vocal.
You should be trying to find out how to articulate why you're doing certain things, right? That's kind of what I keep getting back to with these questions of why do you do that? I haven't really gotten good answers to why people compress, right? We went on that last time we talked. It's like, well, why do you to balance? Okay, there's other tools now. So it's understanding that technology has become more advanced, and we can do other things with these tools, or don't even need to use tools. So yes, you should know how to do everything well enough to describe why you're doing it, and then speak the language to the person that you're going to hire to spice it up, whether it be the producer from the demo or the engineer who's mixing it after the producer touches it, right, along the food chain.
I think my main advice to everybody who's asking about how to record vocals, how to mix vocals, and we can get into some specifics. I was actually listening to some of my favorite vocal productions earlier today in prep for talking to you. But I think anybody who wants to get better at making their vocals sound good, which these days is pretty much anybody making music because so many people are self-recording, is do it a lot and try a bunch of stuff and be a mixer, be an engineer, be a singer,
be a sound designer.
Do all of that stuff, and it will inform what you're doing more than anything else. I
think the term sound designer incorporates most of that besides the singer. And in effect, the singer should be sound designing as well, depending on how they're vocalizing and doing things with their mouth, right? I think the sound designer term is new and fresh in our industry. Like, to call a mixer, sure, but a producer can also be a mixer. But is a producer a mixer if he's not doing the final mix? No, the producer's a sound designer. The engineer that is co-producing with his production partner is the sound designer or a sound designer. And a mixer is also a sound designer.
So this is an all-encompassing term. That are you coining this? Are you trying to? Because I'm with you on it.
No, I know. I've been thinking about this for a bit. Like, what do I do as a mixer in my role? What am I doing? I'm not doing what Bruce Swedien did when he mixed Michael Jackson. That's not what I'm doing. I'm doing some of that, but it's not the only thing I'm doing, right? So I did this mix the other day that the artist and the producer said, love the way the vocal sounds. You know what I did to the vocal? I put it through some outboard tubes and I filtered up to 100. And I think I had like a transient shaper on the top. Like, between my gear, the little bit of gear that I have that does some love, the needles weren't even moving, some color, it was processed well, sent to me, and then I just a little here and there, right? And that's an inspiringly recorded vocal that It gives me the flexibility to do that. That's why the importance of this conversation discussing recording vocals is to allow someone like me really allowed to bring that character that they felt. I think they more felt it than heard it, because it's such a subtle enhancement that I bet they can't even put a finger on what exactly I did. And I'm telling you guys online what I did, but I barely did anything, right? Yeah. So I just did the right things. And that's because I know and I can tell you why I did them. I didn't do them because someone told me I should do them. And that's kind of the difference that I'm trying to get at with sound design versus mixing. A mixer knows why they made that move. It's a very intentional position in the process. At this point, I think you can say it wasn't always like that, and you were designing and building things from the core, from the ground up, like we were talking about this one week. The engineer used to be the final mixer. So the recording engineer and the mixer were the same person for a lot of time. And then there was a middleman that came in, that's the producer with the engineer, and then the engineer and the producer would be too fed up with hearing the song, they'd pass it off to a trusted set of ears to finish, and then that went on to the mastering engineer. At one point it was a team, they were all in the room, go team, and getting it done. So the sound designer term, I don't know what the coinage of it is. I mean, sound designers have been around for, people that program synth software are
That's
sound
what
designers.
I always heard it as, people who are creating new sounds. I like the idea of, it's, we can get into like a Grammy definition discussions and industry things, but I like the idea of removing the term of someone is a mix engineer or is a producer or is a whatever. Because really these days everybody does or should or has the ability to do everything. I mean, the idea of a producer in the old school sense, was more like Rick Rubin, somebody who just kind of facilitated and got the right people together. But now somebody adds a hi-hat and they're a producer, and I don't begrudge that. I think it's actually great. And they are also an engineer and also a musician, and how you define those things.
Did they record that hi-hat? Did they record it? I mean, I got asked to. I have a couple of thoughts. I just want to jump in on that. So I got asked to do a co-production on a thing, and I wound up playing the drums on it. So I recorded
physically.
The drums. I played the drums. Yeah. I recorded the drums. Therefore, I guess I'm an engineer. I'm now asked to be a producer, which brings me to my second part of this discussion is I think you are what you're hired and asked to do. So this Saturday, I got a text from an A&R. We work a lot together. And he said, yo, I need you to mix this thing for me for a really fast turnaround. I am a mixer. I'm a mix engineer because he just hired me to mix a song. He did not say, put your spin on it and add drums and produce and do what you will with it. He asked me to mix it. So in that role, I want to remain holding on to the title of I am the mix engineer for that project. That does not mean that I or I are only a mix engineer and we should identify as mix engineers. I do not identify as a mix engineer. I identify as Jonathan Castelli, who likes to do a lot of things, likes to be kind to his friends and other humans. Like there's other ways to identify. Mix engineer would not be one of them. Yeah. But I do get asked to mix, right? So if someone were, if you had a project, right, and you're writing it, and you get to a point, you're like, I know this needs more than just a mix. Let me call my buddy John. You call me and you say, hey man, I'm thinking it's almost there, but make some waves here, push some things around, mute some things, maybe do some sound design, like do some effects, some ambience, stuff like that. Then that brings up the conversation, and I would say back to you, again, this is all in communication. This is back to the beginning of this conversation, discussing people backing out of sessions and what's your reason why. It's open communication. So if you're saying, I want you to do this, then I'm going to say, cool. So am I producing it with you, or are you saying do some delay throws and, what are you looking for here, right? Then we just get into what are we looking for, and then the title can shift accordingly. And again, it seems to want to come down to communication, and people are too tentative on that to assert themselves because they're like, well, we'll see what happens. It's like, sure, we can see what happens to a degree. How much did you put in? If you did a hi-hat loop, and then the main producer on the record, it's like, damn, that feel has shifted so much. Like that's warranted of publishing. You might, by the time there's 17 people involved, you might only get 2%, but you got 2%. So you got something because it's a mutual a mutual feeling of what you deserve from your auditions. And if there was no conversation, they could think that you're not feeling like you're even deserving of that, and then try to pull a fast one, and not necessarily intentionally at all. It can be, oh, well, he's a mixer, so he's adding this, and that's all.
That's a really hard topic. There's a lot of.
Well, why is it hard though? I don't think communication should be that hard when someone's engaging you for finances.
I don't think it shouldn't. It shouldn't.
This is our job. This is our job.
Yeah. All I'm saying, and shout out South Africa. Someone from South Africa is saying hi.
Hey.
It's something that comes up a lot. Is I think what my response to it. It comes up a lot. I think it is not a contradiction to what you're saying, but you know this to be the case that pretty much no matter what you do in this industry, you are going to be doing, if you want to be successful, and the most successful people I know always do a bit more than what the job actually asks.
Yes.
And I think everybody feels this way, that they never quite get all the credit that they deserve. And it's probably true, and it's also okay.
Credit is different than compensation. And if you did something, I'm mostly not credited, so I've already given up on fighting for credits. My conversation.
What do you mean you're mostly not credited?
Engineers aren't credited on Spotify #1.
Yeah.
And on Tidal, where they are, I'm usually not there. It's just a kind of a thing, and I just send a screenshot to my manager, Nathaniel, and I say, Nathaniel, can you sort this? Even on my birthday, one of the biggest records probably of this year for me came out, and I love the artist. We're friends. I'm going to keep that nameless because it's not his fault. But I wasn't credited, and I mixed 12 songs on a 22-song album. And it's like there's nowhere to be found. So clearly we don't do it for the credit. That being said, I do it for compensation. So I'd like to be, if I'm deserving of it, again, this is what the communication and conversation has to do with. If you're deserving of a piece of the master, the copyright of the song in perpetuity, or the publishing side of the song and the writing, that part is what sustains you to be creative and lack stress. So to be creative. So yeah. I think that the compensation conversation is a different conversation than credit conversation.
I think a lot of people would say they're the same, or not the same thing, but that they are equally important, if not. I think sometimes credit is even more important. There's records that I've been a small part of, and they're not going to make a lot of money, but it's really important for me for people to know that I contribute to that, because it means a lot to me, and or be a good credit on the resume. I mean, all those things. I think
I used to think that it's just clearly I'm not getting credit anywhere, and I'm still getting hired. So I think my perspective has shifted a little bit on that, but it might be at a certain point in your career that should. Of course, it means more to me to be involved in these records than to get paid for them most of the time. That's a high percentage for sure. But when you're not getting credited all the time or most of the time, it's hard to hold up that side of the bargain on your end to do it only for the credit. So that has slipped from my fingers. I have a higher personal gratification from working on this stuff than the finances. But that can never be shared if they're not being credited. So it's probably me talking myself into what am I really doing this for? I mean, I'm doing it for that, but I'm also doing it to survive so I can do it again, because I'm not going to get credited, so I'm not going to get hired. And
you've had a lot of investment in this thing that I know you're starting to roll out, these conversations, which has been a very engineer focused thing. Do you guys? I assume you have discussions about ways to be credited more, or do you have you can either speak on that, or do you have a place where someone can go look at your credits? Do you have a website that lists them?
I have a website. I've failed to keep up the discography, but there's enough. The way I see that is there's enough shit on there that if you don't like anything of the 800 songs that are up there, like, don't hire me. It's fine. But yeah, there's plenty. I have an ongoing playlist that's on my website that is linked to Spotify with an updated resource of the work that I do.
I should do that.
I have an idea. Yeah, you should do that.
That's a flex too. Just like, look at all this shit I did.
I have an idea under conversations with Michael. We've discussed this, that we want to consolidate top 3 records monthly from the engineer community and make a playlist that showcases their work. The tough part about the Spotify thing is the engineers are not credited, so it would be hard to search them. On title playlists, you could type in the engineer's name and find their work. So it's tough because Spotify. So yeah, we need to get Spotify to credit the engineer first. And yeah, I have thoughts on how to do that and people to talk about that with. We kind of, because of the pandemic, as you know, have postponed that, and we're figuring out how to produce more content for people to listen to along the lines of what you and I are doing. So that has taken precedence over getting myself credited on things. But yeah, I think it's extremely valuable, and that's what you're talking about. You're talking about keeping that in the forefront of why we do things. And it really is. If I'm being honest, it really is. But this is a business, and it is my job. And I do have employees, and I'm a manager, and I have people that rely on me, and I take reliability really serious. Yeah. It's something that I'm thankful to even have the brain capacity to be held accountable for.
The idea of getting people the ability to see who's worked on what, it seems more and more important the more we get into internet world and social media world, where you can see people being connected and see people posting pictures with their friends. Man, it would be great if there was just a resource. I mean, it used to be all music back in the day, or back in the day, it's still the internet, but like back in the day, that would just, you could actually look through and see everybody's credits. I remember doing that. And
I mean, Discogs and All Music are supposed to get the metadata from the labels, and I had 1/20th of what I've released is on both of those.
Yeah, I've definitely sent a lot of emails.
And one of those platforms has some things, and one of them doesn't. It's like, I got a Beyonce credit on one and not on the other. It's like, did I do it or not? No one's going to know. It doesn't matter at the end of the day because no one's hiring me for that. But
I didn't know you did Beyonce. I want you to get that Beyonce credit.
It was 6 years ago. More than that. No, like 8 years ago. No one knows. No one cares.
A song that I did with a band that was unsigned and never came out was like 10 years ago. And then like 4 years ago, their attorney pitched it to Boys to Men, and I sent them the stems and never met them. But I produced a Boys to Men song. That's on the front of my. But I never met them. It wasn't anything that I ever.
It's okay.
But it's like, that's.
Can you send me that song later?
I will send it to you. Yeah.
Oh my God, that's huge! I'm
you gotta get your Beyonce credit. I got my Boys to Men
jealous.
credit. It's all good.
But yes, there should be a place to go for that. And every once in a while, an engineer helped me in mine, sends me a link, and I'm like, oh, this looks cool, except for no one knows about this, and they still only have half. And I forgot what they are. I should have saved those links. They weren't enticing enough to look at it. Like, yeah, this is the new one. You know, I think the Discogs and All Music could do it, right? I think they're supposed to be getting anyway.
Maybe that's another project for us to get into. See if we can.
I'm determined to sort that. I think I need a little bit more clout. Maybe I think I gotta get my seat on the Grammy board before I get that. And
let's go Game B style and like build it on the blockchain and decentralized. Yeah, Queen Killing Kings. Yeah, Queen Killing Kings. That's the song that became the Boys to Men song.
Oh, really?
Somebody asked a question.
Yes,
I know we're jumping through topics and things, but
yeah, please.
It was something you said the other week that I've been thinking about a lot, about how you set up a mix where you, and I'm going to say what I remember it, but maybe talk through it. Talking about the person asked about vocals, how do you mix the vocals, background vocals, that sort of thing. And what went through my head was vocals and low end, which is sort of how you described it. For me, it's vocals and drums, which is sort of the same thing. But I think of the relationship of snare and the high end of drums with the vocals as well as low end. How do you is that still how when you're setting up a mix, it's vocals and low end? It's what do you have an order? How do you conceptualize it?
It's a great question because every mix is different and every engineer will say that, but it usually is different. I've 4 songs yesterday. I don't think I started with the same element on all 4 of those songs yesterday. So let me think back to yesterday. Yeah, the last song I did yesterday was the most fun, and it was sample that had basically everything in it. It was a full sample, and sample flip with kick, 808 snare, hi-hats, 808 cowbell, and vocals. That's pretty much it. So the first thing I did on that was turned everything down 6 dB. And I gave myself headroom from the rough mix and how loud the rough mix was. The rough mix had a crazy energy. I know the producer, he's a great friend of mine, and I know what he wanted out of me. So I gave myself headroom and I turned the kick up. So maybe everything went down 6 dB and the kick went back up 3, right? So all of a sudden that kick's hitting harder than his was in relation to the rest of the record. And then you have to worry about how to rebuild the energy and the high mids and all that density and compression that was happening from a over limited mix.
Sorry, so that's very interesting. You basically, here's your, let's say 10 elements, and you bring everything down and you go kick drum. So it fucking slaps.
So now the kick drum slaps
and then you're going to kind of build up from there.
In relation to everything else, and then I get to rebuild that. Now, that's not an easy win. It's very hard to rebuild in a super dense track. This was not a super dense track. Well, because the way that a million parts are hitting a limiter, the whole glue can fall apart. If there's only a few elements, it's less reliant on that limiting. So it's a bit easier to pull down. Think about it this way. If you're pulling down 6 to 10 dB outside of a limiter, you're revealing all the, I don't want to be a dick, all the moves that weren't made, all the problems in the gain structure, in the part relations and the arrangements, right? You're revealing so much. So I recently got a mix note back saying, it doesn't feel glued anymore. And I'm like, well, my thought back was, it doesn't feel as glued like yours was, because you didn't program it to feel glued. Your programming, your arrangement is not, it's not glued. And so I'm trying to re-glue it.
Is that a demoitis? What up, Justin? Is that a demoitis thing, or is there something, or is it something that is exciting that's happening by crushing it? I mean, I've definitely had many experiences with both.
I think it's both. That's kind of what I'm getting at, is that you have to rebuild it, meaning so I have to be listening and A-Bing with the rough. I think Jason Joshua did this thing on Mix with the Masters recently that said he only listens to the rough once, and it's like in his brain, and that's a talent. Dude, proud of you if that's the talent that you uphold. I don't have that talent.
I don't either.
At all.
By the way, I believe he does have it. I just don't.
I do too. I do believe that. Yeah. It's insane. I actually thought about it yesterday because I just watched that Mix of the Masters, and I thought, okay, I basically have the intent of what this rough was, but now I'm going to turn everything down and start over. And I thought Jason Joshua's head. It's like, oh wait, he's never going to listen to this again. But I did, and I listened a lot, and I A-B'd, and I'm making sure that every nuance that was. Oh my God, that's hilarious.
Yeah, see, I told you about Kean. You and him get along.
That's hilarious. I don't agree with you. There's a lot in the rough mix that is important to maintain in order to make. I
love you, man. Shout out, Kean.
People. Shout out. So, but in a less dense, let's go back to this sample track that my homie Alex produced. It's easier to turn it all down when there's minimal elements, so they're hitting the limiter more individually. They're not reliant on the thing next to it in the frequency spectrum also hitting at the same time. So the feel is then decided on by the producer and their intentions, not a built-in plugin tool that is determining the feel. That's what I'm trying to get at. Right. I don't really know a better way to say it, but limiters over-determine feel most of the time in a rough mix. So when I show people ABs, most of the time, like friends that come up and they're like, oh, that song, like, we just, just show me an AB. Like, it happens every once in a while. I don't mind pulling up a thing. It's harder to do that online just with artists. Like, they might not be cool with you doing that, but with a homie around, like, just whatever. to a degree, obviously. And they're like, oh man, it feels different. It feels better. There's more space between the groove, you know. There's more of a groove. It's more wavy. There's more of the notes I'm getting back in real time are more feeling notes, more not like, oh, it sounds better. It's like, I don't care. Like your rough already sounded good. Besides over dense, high mid, like ridiculous distorted mixes, it's all subjective what sounds good. And I think in that high mid area, I think there's an objective, like if it hurts you too much, and not like a metal record kind of turned up in headphones hurt, but it's just distracting from the emotion of the lyric. If you're doing a ballad and there's 3.5K screaming at you plus 17 dB, that's not gonna no one's gonna be able to connect. It's gonna be super intrusive. OG Volta, no limiter to the end. That's a sweet thought. I mean, that's a thought I had like a decade ago. And you're killing it. I mean, we talk every day. You're killing it with your no limiter to the end. In the production, I think in the mix, that's harder. I would still say in the production, it might be nice to have one on for certain people that don't have proper monitoring where they can get their system loud enough, right? A lot of the times you're putting a limiter on to get more level. You should just turn your volume up to get more level and sort out loudness in the end. So I think that's kind of where I don't fully agree with the no limiter to the end, because you might need a little bit, but I would say if we're going numbers, I'd never go below -2 on a threshold. 4 max, but 2 really.
What about the just...
Like when I get,
go ahead,
sorry,
go ahead.
when I get a mix in and the producer says, "Oh, don't worry, there's not that much on the mix bus," and then Josh is prepping it. It's a Pro L2 at the threshold's -10. You're like, wait, what do you mean not too much? Do you understand what that's doing? And no, it's not the same as me just turning everything up 10 dB. It's not the same thing.
Yeah.
So you go. Sorry.
Where are there creative advantages to just smashing things on a limiter when you're making a beat? Or, I mean, if it's changing something dramatically in a sonic way where it's changing the relationship with the transients and things like that, how do you then think about reconstructing that in such a way that you get some of that effect? Because there's times when I'm swapping out drum sounds and I forget that the limiter's on there, and all of a sudden I've got a new snare drum that goes, it's like 10 dB louder, but because it's going into a limiter, it has this cool, like, exciting squished effect where it just distributes the transient.
But what you're doing is you're answering the real question. The question is, why are you doing it again? Right?
But not even why am I doing it? If I get to a result that I'm just like, this sounds dope, I don't know how I got here. There is no why. It's just what it was.
Yeah.
How do you go about reconstructing that?
Again, that's yes. That's ear training and that's practice. And you know, Josh and I, Josh is here working on the rig. We were talking this morning about a rough mix that we got in recently that was just so smashed, and it wasn't musical. And you know, I wrote an email to the artist with my first pass saying, "Hey, you know, just letting you know that I don't really know how to mix like this rough mix. This isn't my style." Just being really transparent about how I'll never be able to mix like that. Yeah. It was just so loud. It was like an open ballad with a piano and some basic drums. It was 8 elements, and it just sounded like there was 600. Yeah. It was madness sounding because of limiting. The sustain of the piano was exclusively coming from the over limiting on the bus.
Wow.
So then when you take the over limiting on the bus off the piano, it's like really short release.
Right.
That's not cool. Like, there's nothing about that's vibe. If you want that piano to sustain and be full and embodied and lush and long, make the sustain on the piano longer, or limit the piano by itself to bring up that sustain. Why are you relying on the entire mix bus to do that, right? So to answer your question, if you love the way that this loop and this snare drum that's super loud and it's like hitting the limiter or the compressor and making a move, that's tight. No one's arguing that that's not vibe, and you don't have to make sense of why that sounds cool to you. That's taste, right? That's not what I'm saying is an over reliance on it on a bus or a master. That's that it's not on the individual sound designing of that shape and that part.
Figure out how to achieve these things on an individual basis rather than just smashing your mix into a limiter for and relying on the glue.
Yeah, to be honest, it's laziness. It's laziness, and I know this to be the case. I've done it when I'm up late and I need to send in a songwriting demo to the A&R, and I've just clamped the limiter down to make it loud. I used to do that like 6, 7, 8 years ago, and I didn't do it as bad as other people because I am inherently an engineer, but I would go further than I normally would just to make some glue vibe. But I would always intend on reducing that later, and now I just wouldn't do it at all.
Yeah.
But I think it's laziness because a lot of the times, again, in my position of getting stems, I mean, people don't even know how to send the stems at all levels. They don't even know how to export with their processing on or off. And then I'm still waiting 2 weeks now for Josh to get the proper stems from someone that's a A-list producer. And it's like, are they busy with something maybe bigger? Like, there's obviously reasons why this stuff happens, but to rely on one plugin, one tool to give you all of that character,
yeah,
it doesn't sound like a good idea.
Yeah,
sounds like laziness.
I feel your passion.
It sounds like lack of.
I really like it.
You what?
I like your passion.
I mean, this is what I deal with on a daily basis, right? So, I think we talked one week. I have a pretty good batting average for getting approved mixes. I think last year I had 2 that didn't get across the line, and so far halfway through this year I have 1 that they went.
How many songs did you mix last year?
384.
That's a lot of fucking songs.
A lot of songs. 384, and 2 didn't get used, and they were on the same album too. So I think they were both on the same album. Anyway,
you want to name drop it? Which album?
Louth.
Okay.
I think I mixed 12, got 10 on the album. Yeah.
Oh, Evan, as a good question, are there examples where you think hyperlimiting works as stylistic choice? Absolutely. I think you're saying that too. Yes,
of course. Again, on individual elements and smaller groups of things to create that vibe. So this is what I was gonna get at too, right? So this is my daily basis. So when those songs don't work out every time, it's because the rough mix was so loud. They're always above -8 LUFS songs. Like, I don't know how to mix like that. I don't know how. I used to, back when I was listening to Skrillex all the time. I would go hotter than that, and I can make it feel dynamic. I know how. I don't like it. I don't think that's how you translate the message of the song the best most of the time. That being said, I think it's tight if you want an overcompressed rock and roll drum sound and make your drums pump and dial in that release and get that push. And I'm down with that. Don't put it on your mix bus. Do it on your drum bus. And then figure out a way to commit that and make it work on your stems properly before delivering it, or send screenshots with what it's doing so I can remake it, or so someone can remake it, so you're not putting them to a disadvantage.
I imagine you get quite a bit of songs that are basically track and then a bunch of vocals. But maybe not. Maybe there's a lot of this, but I feel like a lot of hip hop is a track gets sent out, somebody writes a song over it, cuts a bunch of vocals, and then it gets sent off to a mix with instrumental and a bunch of vocals. I've certainly gotten bits of that before, and it seems like on those songs, I'm just curious for you to kind of to speak on it, but for a lot of those songs, when you get the track has full compression, limiting, mastering, everything, and then you're mixing vocals over a fully mastered instrumental track. Is that
I won't mix 2-track to vocal.
Really?
I won't do it anymore.
Somebody just goes, "Hey, will you mix this?" You go, "Yes." They send it to you like that. You're like, "I'm not doing it."
No, yeah. Why? What's my job?
Making the vocals sound good over a slamming track.
I'll mix the vocal and send the vocal stem back so they can put it into their mix.
They can do it
I'd rather do that. Right?
Have you had that experience where you said, "Hey, part this out for me"?
All the time. All the time.
Take off the limiting and let me do my thing.
Yeah, I haven't had to mix a 2-track and vocal in couple of years now. I think the last time I did that was on the Summer Walker record. I think there were 1 or 2 songs on it. They lost the stems, and there was, in that circumstance, you're mixing a whole album. It's like, this song's tight though, and it's only got this, and it's got to go on the record. Of course, I'll do it.
Did you do this whole Summer Walker album?
The first album, the last days of Summer Walker.
Dude, I need to look at your discography more. That's
the black and blue cover with the Drake "Girls Need Love" on it.
Yeah, that's it.
That was when I said earlier I had a dry Drake vocal. That's the experience that I had.
Somebody asked a really good question on here, which you and I have talked about a little bit. I don't know that actually we have time right now. We should do it next week. But there's a lot of, we haven't had a lot of specific questions on Instagram about it, but I've talked to a few people about it, and so this is more of a mastering question. What level do you shoot for with the streaming platforms? Minus 14 is recommended, but I want to have a whole discussion.
We've talked about this little bits in here and there. It's going to be, it's too much.
And they,
too much right now.
They keep changing it, and the algorithms are different.
I'll just say I personally shoot for this purpose. I personally shoot for minus 10.
Knowing that they're going to reduce it by 4.
By 4 on Spotify, normalization, and Apple Music if it's turned on. It's turned on for most people. It's defaulted that way in Spotify. I think that usually works. It's enough loudness, density to compete and sound loud to a team of people that need to approve it before it gets there, and also doesn't lose transients and dynamics when it gets turned down. So I like minus 10, and by a loud last chorus that's maybe really dense, maybe a minus 9 at the peak there. Again, that's overall program loudness. That's not max loudness. That's the average. So if minus 10 is the average, you're going to probably be hitting sections at minus 8, and that's okay. So be okay with that. But they're doing it based on average and verse the chorus, how they turn it down.
Yeah, so I have 12 questions off of what you just said there. And because I still don't know, okay, we're talking about loudness, we're talking about LUFS, but some of the streaming services don't use LUFS to measure it. It's a slightly different thing. And are you talking about before you send it to a mastering engineer? And then what is the mastering engineer delivering? Are they delivering it different for different services? Should they
They should.
Yeah,
Dale Becker and I have been discussing this. There should be a mastered for Spotify version right now, but we almost got across the line on the Khalid album, and then the A&R admin was like, "Oh, I've never even heard of this. Why are we doing this?" And I'm not sure if that was a money thing. I'm not sure if it was because it's just never been done before. And it was too late to the deadline.
To do different versions for different streaming services?
Yeah, because Master for iTunes is just 1 dB quieter, so it doesn't distort. Spotify asks for it to be at minus 2 peak. So we should turn all masters down minus 2 dB before it goes to Spotify. No matter what your LUFS is. LUFS is just overall average loudness from section to section in the arrangement. That's not the same as peak. So if they're recommending peak be minus 2, why don't we just experiment and try turning it down? What, you're going to put it in QuickTime and it's not going to sound as loud as it does against your rough mix? Get out of here. Start trusting people that know what they're doing and talking about. We're supposed to trust, Dr. Fauci with the COVID-19
all right.
epidemic.
The politics.
But you know what I mean? But
I
that's the most universal version of this right now, that people start to trust the doctor who's studying the infectious disease when we're locked down, the economy's shut down. Trust the engineers and master engineers specifically, not even myself as a mix engineer.
Yeah.
Start trusting the mastering engineers and what they're supposed to do best. Y'all write the songs, y'all record them, y'all produce them, y'all make them vibes for days. Just make that shit sick, and we won't ruin it because we all want the best for that. That's all we're in this for. We're not in it for our names on it because we don't even get credited. So sorry for that passion.
No. No apologies for passion. Passion is what we're here for. Mastering engineers for president. We got another 40 seconds. Hey, first off, thank you. It's good to see you again. We're going to be back doing these every week. Everybody, please send us questions, give us feedback, topics you want us to discuss. We'll just kind of rant on whatever we feel. Also, I would love to, when you start doing the more formal discussions again, conversations, I would love to moderate a conversation with you and Becker.
You will.
And ask all of the all the dumb guy questions, because
there's
a whole lot of interesting stuff that I think people could enjoy. So we got 10 seconds left. I love you. It's good to see you again.
Love you too.
We'll be back doing this next week. Thank you guys for tuning in, and be well. Stay safe.
Till next time.